When you're hunting for a new gaming rig, you're not really after a glossy spec sheet. You want something that will sit on your desk, run the games you love without hiccups, and actually feel worth the cash you're dropping. The biggest fear is spending a bundle on a machine that looks impressive on paper but ends up being a noisy, heat-hogging beast that forces you to keep tweaking settings just to stay in frame rate territory. And let's be honest, you also don't want to waste time on a system that takes forever to boot or constantly crashes because the cooling can't keep up. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So I spent the last few days setting up the PC, running a mix of AAA titles, streaming a bit, and just using it as my everyday workstation. The first thing I noticed is how quickly it boots into Windows 11 Pro. The pre-installed OS means there's no long Windows 10 upgrade dance, just a handful of driver updates, and you're ready to roll. That's a real time saver for anyone who doesn't want to fiddle with BIOS settings or reinstall the OS from scratch. In my case, I dropped the SSD into the slot, ran the power switch, and within a couple of minutes I was already launching Elden Ring from the desktop. Performance-wise, the Intel i7 12700KF paired with the Radeon RX 6900 XT does what the headline promises: smooth 1080p and solid 1440p play across most modern titles. I ran Cyberpunk 2077 on ultra settings, and the frame rate stayed comfortably in the 70-80 FPS range without any stutter. That's impressive because the 6900 XT is still a generation behind NVIDIA's latest cards, yet the combination with the 12-core, 20-thread i7 allows the GPU to be fully fed. What matters in real life is that you can push high-resolution textures and ray tracing without the game dipping into the low 30s, which is often the bottleneck on budget rigs. Now, you might be wondering about the liquid cooling. The system comes with a closed-loop cooler that's neatly routed around the CPU and the graphics card. In practice, the cooler stays quiet during normal gaming sessions. Think a soft hum, similar to a quiet HVAC system. When the GPU ramps up under intense load, the pump kicks in and you'll hear a faint whine, but it never blows past a modest 45 dB, which is well below the threshold that would be distracting. Over a full evening of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the radiator remained cool enough that the CPU never crossed the 80°C mark. That's a big plus for anyone who plans long gaming marathons or streams for several hours. Thermal throttling isn't an issue here. Memory and storage also stand out. 32 GB of DDR4 RAM is more than enough for gaming, content creation, or even light video editing. The RGB lighting on the RAM modules is optional aesthetic flair, but it's subtle enough not to be overpowering. The 1TB NVMe SSD gives you quick load times. Most games are under 5 seconds from launch to the main menu, a noticeable improvement over older SATA drives. If you're the type who likes to keep a library of large titles installed at once, the SSD might fill up fast, but the system also supports additional drives if you decide to expand later. Where the value really comes from is the combination of high-end components with a plug-and-play experience. Most pre-built gaming PCs you see in the market either require you to upgrade the power supply or replace the cooling solution after a few months. This rig ships with an 800W PSU that's comfortably oversized for the current hardware, meaning you have headroom for future GPU upgrades without worrying about power constraints. That's something you don't get with many budget-oriented builds that skimp on the wattage and end up needing a new PSU after a year or two. Who should buy this machine? If you're a serious gamer who wants to run the latest AAA titles at high settings without diving deep into overclocking or component swaps, this is a solid choice. It's also a good fit for creators who need a reliable workstation for rendering or streaming thanks to the powerful CPU, ample RAM, and steady cooling. On the other hand, if you're a casual gamer who only plays older titles or indie games, you'll likely be overpaying for this level of performance. Likewise, if you're a die-hard hardware enthusiast who enjoys building and tweaking every piece yourself, you might feel constrained by the sealed liquid cooling system and the pre-installed OS. There are a couple of practical downsides you should keep in mind. First, the size of the case is fairly large. It's not a compact mini-tower you can slip under a desk easily. If you have limited floor space, you'll need to measure your setup before ordering. Second, while the system is quiet, the RGB lighting can be a little bright if you prefer a low-key workspace. It's not a deal breaker, but you'll want to dial down the lighting in the software if you need a darker ambience. Finally, because the machine comes fully assembled, the